The easiest commercial property for beginners to own, that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So many beginner investors in real estate start off with a home or maybe like a duplex apartment. And I understand that. There are issues with that. For those of you who own those type of properties, you know that you're dealing with tenants. That could be demanding. You might have been to the landlord-tenant board trying to resolve an issue which could take over a year. You're probably dealing with toilets. You're probably doing weekend visits for problems, whatever it is. But today I'm going to tell you that the easiest commercial property for beginners to own are industrial units. So what are industrial units, right? Industrial units are basically a box. You've got four walls. You've got a front facade with a front door, typically glass. And then you have a shipping area in the back, which has either a truck level door or a dock door for those transport trucks to come in, or it's a roll-up garage type door where you bring in a cube van or your F-150 truck, if you understand what I mean. So why industrial units? Well, because they're the easiest commercial property, right? And why are they easy? Well, industrial units are easy to find, they're easy to fill, they're easy to fund, and they're easy to manage for a profit. So I know that if you go to a bank, it's probably easy to get a mortgage for a residential home because that's what most banks do. But I can tell you it's not that harder to find financing for an industrial unit, only because industry is happening everywhere. And as far as a bank's risk is concerned, they don't find industrial units as risky, let's say, as retail or a data center, let's put it that way, right? So an small industrial unit is just basically four walls. 10 to 15% of it is really allocated towards some office area. So not a lot of improvements. Let's say in a home, you really have high-end furnishes. And then the rest of it is just warehouse. So, unlike having a furnace in a house, you might have a space heater in the warehouse. You might have an HVAC unit on the top just for that office portion. But it's real easy to manage as well. So simplicity is key. These are units that are essentially vanilla properties, right? Basic functional spaces that don't require extensive customization like a house. So in talking about industrial units, we're talking about an asset class that is typically high in demand all the time. And I'm not asking you to go out and buy some 100,000 square foot big factory. I'm asking you to consider investing in a small industrial condo unit that appeals to a broad range of use. This could be a sales office where they just need the warehouse to store material. It could be a contractor. Now, there's tons of contractors in every city, communities large and small, that could use the warehouse to put their machinery and equipment in the warehouse, and their office administration, all that stuff goes in the front. So it's one of those type of assets that is really easy to get into, easy to maintain, and the demand is always there to some extremes. For example, I'm in the Toronto market. In the greater Toronto area, demand for industrial units, especially the smaller the size, the more demand there is, and it remains pretty strong. So here, we're looking at a pretty soft market. Currently, vacancy rates are hovering below or around 5%. Now, they used to be less than 1%. So relatively speaking, we're in a soft market. But when you're underwriting property, the bank will ask you to use a 5% vacancy anyway. So, anything beyond 5%, you can still navigate with some success. So it's when those interest rates are the vacancy rates are really, really high. But let's just say for Toronto, the vacancy rate here is about 5%, and the average rental rate for a small unit, let's say about 2,000 square feet, is going around $17.50 per square foot. I'm going to give you an example. So for instance, I'm in the Toronto market. The vacancy rate is not exactly very low, as in residential might be, but we're about 5%. Okay, so that's still a pretty healthy market, all things being considered over history. In this particular market, rents for, let's say, a 2,000 square foot building is about $17.50, okay? And that 3,000 square foot building you can find in and around the greater Toronto area maybe not in the core, but a little bit outside. Okay, so let's just use that as an example. Sale price based on $1 million, and we're going to use $1 million because that would be your opportunity cost. You can go out there in Toronto and buy a home for $1 million, or you can take that money and buy it into this easy asset called industrial real estate. So the average sales price for a 3,000 square foot property, give it $1 million, would come out to about 300 and change a square foot. So let's just assume we just bought this thing for $335 a square foot, okay? And the rental rates are $17.50. Your annual net operating income for a 3,000 square foot unit would be about $52,500 per year. Now I say net operating income because industrial real estate as opposed to residential, we're talking about the net money that goes in your pocket. Now, when you're renting out a house, you're usually doing this on a gross basis. Here's a number, pay me this rent each month, all in, it takes care of your utilities. We're taking all that out and we're pushing that responsibility on the tenant when you're talking about commercial real estate. So you're gonna take that $52,500 and you're gonna divide it by that price of $1 million, and you're gonna get a cap rate of 5.25%. Okay, that's not bad. So that's probably more return on your money than you would get from renting out a house. So when you're comparing the two opportunities, already you can see this is much simpler and it's probably going to be more rewarding for returns. So the cap rate is quite competitive here at 5.25%. It outperforms many bond yields that are out there right now and provides more stability than, let's say, stocks, if you were to take that $1 million and put it in stocks. So if you can secure financing with a lower interest rate than that 5.25%, you are achieving positive leverage, meaning you're earning more than your financing costs, and that property is going to pay for itself. So another advantage of owning industrial real estate is due to the tenant benefits, okay? It's simplified management. Similar to residential leasing, just like renting out an apartment, you have a tenant who pays the rent. And they also take care of the basic upkeep of the property. In this case, the tenant covers all the major expenses, okay? So unlike having an apartment where you have to come in and fix everything every time they feel there's a problem with the air, with the plumbing, the water, the heating, with an industrial unit, they take care of all that. It is called a triple net lease or an absolute lease, and all that then gets downloaded to the tenant. So in this case, the tenant covers all the major expenses, including taxes, maintenance, and insurance, otherwise called TMI, and even the commercial condo fees if you happen to buy an individual unit amongst a bunch of multi-tenanted units in a bigger condo development. So one of the other benefits, moving on, is fewer hassles. You're not dealing with the landlord-tenant board for any dispute resolution. Commercial leases typically provide for quicker remedies whenever there is a tenant that's in default, okay? So you're not gonna be handling the maintenance issues like clogged toilets or burnt out light bulbs. That's all on the tenant. And if the tenant does default or break a rule or becomes unruly, you have the right to remedy that default. And sometimes that just means calling the local sheriff, putting chains on the doors, and then being compensated for the damage that you are owed. It's not going to take a long drawn-out process of a year to going into the landlord and tenant board process, which you're really never assured a positive outcome for you. So you'll be working standard business hours in this case when you have an industrial unit, just like your commercial tenant. No late night calls or weekend visits. Here's another benefit, scaling up, okay? With an industrial condo unit, you have the power of multi-tenanted industrial condos. Let's say you've now graduated from one unit. You're going to take the money, the equity that you have in that, you're going to refinance out, and you're going to take some of the extra money and you're going to buy multiple units. Now imagine if you can scale this model. So scaling using industrial condos are just as easy as you would be scaling up your portfolio using residential houses. I'll give you even one better. We talked about the price of this particular example being, $300, $335 a square foot. What if you got so good at this that you can actually develop a 10-unit condo project? So rather than buying one at a time and paying more, let's say retail price for each condo, you're actually going to pay, or your cost per square foot, instead of being $335 a square foot, is going to come down to $250 a square foot, and still rent them out at $1,750 a square foot. Now that cap rate that we talked about, which was about 5.25, jumps up to 7%. So, and the cost of building it is only $250 versus buying it at $335. So this demonstrates the potential for growing your investment by leaps and bounds and increasing the profitability through lower construction costs versus buying retail or resale with someone else selling you their old unit. So I just want to stress that there's steady demand for this type of product. And if you can take a product that's going to cost you $250 and sell it at $335 or greater now that you have a tenant in there, you've just increased your return exponentially. So industrial units offer an ideal starting point for beginners in commercial real estate. They're simple to manage, offer predictable returns, and are backed by a strong rental market. Plus, with the right financing and scaling strategy, you can achieve strong returns with relatively low risk. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Until next time,